Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining on this beautiful Tuesday morning. I am Katie Shorey, Startup Maine's president, and we are so excited to continue this series. This is our 9th session of the Entrepreneurs and Ecosystem Builder series, and these virtual events feature thinkers and doers from across the state who are working on and building awesome companies and products, and also people who are helping to further develop our ecosystem. And today I am so excited to bring you a conversation about the Maine Angels. Today's event would not be possible without our sponsors, Bangor Savings Bank and Maine Technology Institute, as well as our business news sponsor, Maine Biz. And we are also proud to be supported by the Maine Venture Fund. So now for a quick shout out to our sponsors. For those who don't know about Maine Technology Institute, it was founded and funded in 1999 by the Maine State Legislature, and they offer grants, loans, equity investments, and services to support Maine's innovation economy. They support new ideas, products, or methods with the potential to grow and diversify Maine's economy. And MTI also supports Maine's innovation economy through event sponsorships that promote innovation like this series. So we thank them. They have been such a supportive partner over the years. And to learn more and to find out if you are eligible for funding, visit mainetechnology.org. We are also supported by the Maine Venture Fund. The mission of MVF is to invest in dynamic businesses that have the potential for significant growth and impact in Maine. And I will also share a brief 30-second video from our sponsor, Bangor Savings Bank. So here we go.
All across New England, business owners are finding new ways to succeed. Families are working hard to provide for their loved ones and their future. It's the spirit of New Englanders that inspires all of us to do more. It's in our employees, our customers, and our communities. Every day we do more. Because at Bangor Savings Bank, we truly believe you matter more.
All righty, here we go. So I am so excited for today's conversation. It's been a long time in the works. I'm very excited to introduce you to today's guests, Susan, Morris, and Matt Ware. Welcome. So let's jump right in. We have a lot to cover today. We're going a little bit longer, as folks know. So let's start by getting to know our panelists here. Tell us about you, your professional life, and how you made your way to Maine. So Susan, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for having us, and Matt, a pleasure to collaborate with you on this endeavor. Professional background. I think what's most relevant for what led me to angel investing, the topic of the day, is that in looking back, I have always been entrepreneurial in spirit, and most of my career has been in starting new things. I had a career in the hotel industry, 13 years with Marriott. Had the pleasure of introducing the Marriott brand to Canada, my home country, as well as working internationally. When I joined Marriott, there was one brand, one size fits all. And when I left, there were 19 different brands. So that was a lovely way for me to become aware of what it takes to start something new. I then progressed into the idea of how will people get work done in the future, which seems, I wish I had had that foresight of realizing what the last year was going to be like. But I was with HQ Regis for a number of years, and we acquired 48 companies in 17 countries to create the world's largest network of co-share workspaces, and had 500 centers in the world. So that took care of how people travel and what they do in their leisure and what they do in hotels. Then I looked at how people work. And then together with my partner, Chip Newell, we had a real estate development firm. And we created 5 mixed-use projects in downtown Washington, D.C., had the pleasure of becoming part of the rejuvenation of the district. And then we moved to Maine, and sticking with the career path, we have our company, New Height Group, and people would probably most know the company because of the 3 condominium projects that are either done or underway here in Portland. So all of those, and that was really looking at how do people live and how will they live in the future, and having the opportunity to design the space along with the amenities humanities. So I think that career path kind of led the way for what I have ended up doing, which we'll get to later. And then in terms of coming to Maine, Chip is a Bowdoin grad. Woohoo! I'm sure others will pipe up with whatever's, but let's get real. Many people come to Maine because of their college experience, and that's a beautiful thing. So we initially lived about 10 years in Boothbay Harbor and had the chance to be involved in endeavors there. And then we came to Portland and started developing. And I cannot say enough good things about living in the state of Maine. Does it remind me of Canada? Oh, yes. But where else can you live in a place like Maine and have the feeling that of such community? You know, we say that are people like 2 degrees of separation in this state? It's just if you want to be a person that rolls up the sleeves and gets involved, this is a great place to be. So now that I've done that commercial, Matt, it's over to you.
Yeah. I'm glad that you said that, though, because we have a bunch of folks calling in today that aren't necessarily in Maine. So we want to show them what a great community it is to here and how to get involved. So we'll touch on that later, but I'm glad you made the plug. So Matt, over to you.
Thanks. So my story is somewhat different than Susan's, which I think is reflective of the Maine Angels as a broader group. I'm actually a Maine native, was born and raised in Norway, which is in Western Maine in Oxford County. One of my high school classmates 1 year behind me actually just apparently married Jeff Bezos's ex-wife, an Oxford Hills grad. So we were in the news yesterday, which was exciting. So the bulk of my professional career has been working as a management consultant. I spent the last 15 years working as a consultant, in the last sort of 7 years as a senior partner in a global consulting firm, which was great because it's allowed me to live in Maine. I did it like I think a lot of Mainers. When I actually went away to college and then had several stints overseas, a couple in Australia and lived for a year in Norway. But consulting was actually, albeit with a lot of transit through the Portland Jetport, a great way for me to live and raise my family in Maine, which was always my kind of objective. So in that practice, I focused a lot on what I sort of call the cash machine of businesses, the operations, the capital execution, supply chain, that sort of thing. So I think it actually lends itself well to understanding business models and how businesses actually make money, which has sort of been an interest of mine. And in one of my stints in Australia, I worked for a software startup. So I at least have some empathy for what life is like inside a startup and all the challenges and excitement that come with that. So that's the story. I live in Durham with my 3 kids and a dog who may or may not attempt to break in here at some point. So
that's great. And I'm from Sweden, Maine. So
there you go. If only we had someone from Denmark, we would have Scandinavia covered.
Really well. So I would love to hear how both of you are involved, other than the Maine Angels. What else have you participated in Maine? Because as you know, that's typically part of the full act of being involved in other things. So Susan, tell us about some of your initiatives. Keep it brief.
There are a number of things that I have touched over the years, Katie, and you and I actually met because of Startup Maine. What sort of led me into the whole ecosystem was that when I came to Maine, I started mentoring or coaching founders, and I quickly realized that I was not in a position to be guiding others. I just did not know enough about the ecosystem of Maine. So I went to school on the ecosystem of Maine while simultaneously getting involved with Startup Maine, TEDx Dirigo, and a number of other endeavors, and doing mentoring with MCE, Women Standing Together, CEI Women's Business Center, whatever. But probably what's most relevant for this group is that I tend to be a person that when I don't know something, I go to school on it. And I started studying Maine's ecosystem with the idea of no entrepreneur should ever fall between the cracks. And it broke my heart to hear of a founder who did not have a chance of succeeding because they didn't know what resource to access at what point in time in their journey. So the result of that was a guide to entrepreneurship in the state of Maine, looking at everything from advocacy to training, education, where do you locate yourself, access to funding, et cetera, et cetera. And that guide has now been done in its 5th edition. However, I will announce that I don't think we will ever publish it again, because one of the goals was that wherever someone comes into the ecosystem, everyone should know where to send them next. And the idea is that all the resources that were listed in that guide are now readily available on most websites done throughout the state of Maine by a variety of entities that I know we're going to toast a little bit later on. But yeah, and then of course being a Maine Angel, but we'll come to that next. Matt, how about you?
So I got into sort of the Maine startup ecosystem through being a Top Gun mentor, which was something that I started doing, gosh, probably maybe almost a decade ago at this point. And I did for a few years until my sort of travel schedule made me too unreliable. So after that, I actually transitioned in 2014 to joining the Maine Angels. And I'm now the vice chair of the organization. So that's been over the last handful of years, along with sort of some involvement with the various companies that I've invested in, my chief sort of activities.
Yep. So let's start focusing in over there. So I think I would love to hear how both of you got into angel investing. And then I also just, before we dive into the presentation, I would love for you also to talk about some of the other capital resources in the state, just so we can understand from a high level where Maine Angels fits in. So let's talk first about how Susan, how you got involved in angel investing.
Yeah. One of my ethics is I don't really like to speak to things in which I have not somehow engaged. So as I was going to school on what does it take for a founder to succeed, and one of those elements being access to funding, I realized that I wanted to learn more about funding and get actively involved in it myself. So I became a Maine Angel in 2013. Which, by the way, so I am almost 8 years in, and I think I have barely touched the surface. And you will hear us all say this time and time again. The most beautiful thing of being part of an angel group is the shared knowledge that takes place. I do not consider myself to be a specialist or an expert angel by any stretch of the imagination. But I became involved in 2013, and now is probably a moment to mention that part of what also engaged me is that it has been very disturbing to me over the years to see the underrepresentation of women within the ecosystem. And at this point, I'll do my first toast of the day, which is to my colleague and partner in most everything angel investing, who is Sandra Stone, Chair Emeritus of Maine Angels. And we are connected at the hip. And I will say that I would not be having any of the success that I feel I've had in any endeavor if it were not for Sandra. So I toast you, Sandra. One of the things that I'm focused on and that became apparent to me is that I would like to see more women starting businesses. I would like to see more women receiving funding. It is pathetic in the United States and the world with the percentage of VC and other funding that goes to women. And I also want to see more women on boards, and that is corporate boards, private boards, startup boards. So I really have a focus on a 3-pronged approach. And one of those is angel investing. And I think I'll have a chance later to talk about how I approach angel investing. So I'll stop there. Matt, if you want to pick up, and then what we haven't addressed, but we can, Katie, is the stages of investing and where angel capital falls in.
Yep, great. Matt, how did you jump in?
Yeah, so as I said, I was doing Top Gun, which I really enjoyed, and then sort of found that I couldn't be reliable enough. So I kind of found Maine Angels, and honestly, my sort of chief motivation was that it struck me as a way for me to be productively involved in Maine and helping kind of build the Maine economy and kind of the future of Maine and support people who are doing great things in Maine. I'm spending a lot of my time in other places with clients, and so that really, to me, the chief draw was that it felt like a way to actually do something and apply my skills and time to helping Maine. And to just briefly touch on and build on Susan's answer to your question, Katie, about other funding sources, I think we'll talk a little bit more, but Maine Angels sort of sits at a point in the ecosystem, which, while it's, I think people think about angels and seed rounds, and it sounds very, very early stage. And it is early stage if you think about a more structured kind of life cycle of fundraising, which leads all the way to some sort of exit. But I think a lot of the iceberg, if you will, of the Maine ecosystem that sits underneath funding at the sort of venture or angel level is grants, loans, and as well as a variety of sort of non-monetary resources that get deployed to nurture, incubate, accelerate a lot of even earlier stage startups, really pre-revenue stuff, pre-product often, and often even startups and entrepreneurial ventures that don't necessarily ultimately fit the bill for angel investing that we never see, but create an environment of innovation and talent development and attractiveness, which I think lifts all boats. So we're extremely grateful as angel investors where we sit, even though we are early stage, for all of the resources. Top Gun is one that I have, a personal connection to, but there's a variety of other incubators, and there's been some fantastic programs that have offered prizes, and obviously MTI, Maine Venture Fund, CEI Ventures, who are all partners of Maine Angels, have been really instrumental. And we honestly couldn't be successful as an angel organization without the sort of nurturing and nourishing of all of these companies, which eventually then bubble up to us.
Susan, anything else to add there? I know that we've been.
Let's rock and roll. No, let's get into this, folks. Fasten your seatbelts. And we have got a mini presentation to provide here that Matt and I are going to fly through because we'd love this to be interactive. Please be providing Katie and all of us with questions that you have. As I say, I've been doing this 7 years and I'm still learning what acronyms and words really mean. So have a pen and paper handy, or however you take your notes, because you might want to do some searching online afterwards. But here we go. By the way, the reason we're doing this today is that our Matt and my colleagues at Maine Angels really did some serious analysis of our 2020 results. And 2020 sucked in so many ways in so many people's lives. One thing that happened is that founders got funding and angels invested. And so one of the reasons we're so pleased to be here in early March is that we'd like everyone to leave today feeling really positive about the amount of funding that took place in 2020, as well as we're going to show you some trends from over the years. So it is a good day for entrepreneurs and for angel investors in the state of Maine. And we want everyone to have that message when we say farewell. All right, so here we go. Katie gave us the heads up that we have everyone from idea on the back of a napkin right on through to some very tenured angel investors living in other states that are on this webinar. So here we go with what we're able to cover. So angel investing, your trivia for the day, and I only learned this last week. Why angel? The term angel is first affiliated with the funding of Broadway plays in New York City. It doesn't get any riskier than that. Angels came forward and funded Broadway plays knowing that they could either flop or go on for decades. So if that's not being an angel, I don't know what is. For some reason, the Securities and Exchange Commission has some ideas on who can be an accredited angel investor. I say that a little facetiously. Of course, people who are not in a position to put money at risk should not do so. So please, you can go online and read all the fine print on how one becomes an accredited investor, but there is criteria for doing so. Angel investors tend to be individuals who decide to put their money at risk with the wonderful carrot of being able to make some serious profit. So this is not philanthropy. And also there is increasingly discussion of social impact investing. Social impact investing can be one type or kind or aspect or lens for angel investing. However, one should not assume that the two are by any means synonymous. Yes, angels invest early with the idea that by putting money at serious risk in that early stage, after family and friends have provided funding, but before an entrepreneur has the opportunity to perhaps go for VC dollars, go to a bank, whatever, this is where the angels come into play. I will now just mention, and I think many times Matt and I will give a disclaimer, much as we are here because we're invited as Maine Angels, Matt and I will speak to what our individual philosophy is. And from this point onwards, I'll try to be clear, but most of the time, I am actually talking about angel investing according to the world of Susan, and I am not in a position to speak as a formal person on Maine Angels. But I'll tell you some things I've learned along the way. Angel investors, we should have a diversified portfolio. Ideally 10 different investments, 20 is even better. But one great 10 multiple return can make up for, so 1 out of 10 can make one return with a 10 exit percent. Help me, Matt, on my language here. I'm fumbling. If I have 10 investments and one is a home run, that will make up for the 9 other perhaps not so well turned out investments that I make. So 1 out of 10, folks. I am aiming for diversification. And diversification can mean different sectors. It can be education, it can be aquaculture, it can be AI, it can be fintech, it can be femtech. Look that one up. It can be diversification of what stage a startup is at. It can be diversification at how experienced the team is, but we're aiming for diversification. And well, yes, there's a focus for many Maine Angels on investing in Maine. And by the way, Maine Angels, we make a decision individually of whether to go in or not. Some angel groups take a vote and they either are all in or they are not investing. With Maine Angels, we individually make that decision. I also am choosing at times to invest outside of the state. I am interested in more trade with Canada. So I am watching the startup scene in Canada and making investments. I care about lifting women. I am looking at female-focused funds that are outside of Maine. I'm interested in social impact investing. I participate in a social impact fund. So just to give you a perspective, again, according to Susan, there is a great deal of diversification that takes place, and there are hundreds of angel groups in the US, and for each one, they have a different philosophy. I also want to mention one thing right now that is really important. Some angel groups have something called paid staff. In Maine, we are a volunteer-run organization, and people dedicate hours and hours to screening, due diligence, everything. So when you next bump into an angel in Maine, thank them for the time they are committing, because we do not have significant paid staff helping us. Onwards, Katie.
Perfect. Okay, so that means I can move on to the next slide here.
Yeah, next in there. Different investors look for different things, but there are some certain commonalities. Yes, it has to be way beyond writing on the back of a napkin. We do want to see that there is proof of concept on that. We look really hard at the management team. Yes, if you are not looking to exit the business, this may not be the path for you to take. So for example, someone who has a single location retail store or a restaurant in the state of Maine, this is probably not the source of funding. There may be individual angels that choose to invest in you, but that would be different. But for ourselves, we are looking for these kinds of returns, and we are looking for exits within 3 to 7 years. And by the way, my philosophy, and because of when I joined, I didn't get the benefit of some of the more recent successful exits. So I am waiting for my first really big exit, because that will then fund my future investing. And of course, we're looking at what the valuation is. And I think I'll wait and we'll talk more about what Maine Angels invest in, because we have some statistics on that are really powerful. But I will say that we do work very closely with other angel groups. We love it when another angel group has already taken on the due diligence. Due diligence is hard, detailed, time-consuming work. So bring it on, Launchpad of Boston, Golden Seeds. We do tend to work with a lot of other groups in New England, and certainly it is lovely when somebody else or another group has already done that lift. I'll also mention, sorry, Katie, go ahead.
And when you say due diligence, that's one of those those sayings that kind of gets thrown around. Just real quick, like what does that mean for the layman listening?
Matt, do you want to pick up? I'm just thinking it'd be nice to hear another voice. Do you want to describe the due diligence process, and then I'll pick back up?
Yeah. Effectively, there's a few different hoops that a company has to jump through in order to successfully land an investment with Maine Angels. Other groups may have slightly different procedures, but they're all broadly the same. The first is there's a basic screening, which is really looking for, at a high level, a lot of the items that are on this page, and a certain level of just kind of maturity. There's a few other criteria. If a company is successful in getting through screening, which is a relatively fine filter, then, and there's enough interest after they pitch, so there's an opportunity for the founder or the management team to pitch their idea, pitch their business model, pitch why they're excited about it and deserving of investment. If there's a quorum or a critical mass of members who are interested, they launch into a structured due diligence process, which is really turning over all of the relevant stones to, rather than taking the sort of projections and assertions that are given in a short pitch, pressure testing all of those, really getting to know the founder, understanding the business model, understanding go-to-market, the technology, the risks, the competitive landscape, as well as whatever the existing capital structure may be, basically all of the aspects that are relevant to the business, and coming up with, and we've over the years developed a nice sort of structured process to do this, but really looking at all the relevant levers to understand, is this, what's a fuller, more detailed picture of this business, which then the investors who are interested in the deal can take that fact base and, as Susan said, make their own kind of independent decisions about whether they're compelled by that or not. But I should highlight that this sounds like it's a kind of scrutiny, and it is, but the consistent experience that we have is that founders actually, perhaps not in the moment itself, but generally find this to be a really valuable process, because often it's the first time that they've had the opportunity to really get a lot of sort of structured, sophisticated thought partnership from sophisticated business people with a variety of backgrounds who don't know their business already. In many cases, they've previously relied on board members or other people where there's a sort of connection. And there's a lot of value in that more independent assessment. And even we find that companies who are not successful in getting an investment after diligence often emerge from that process with a much clearer picture of some of the areas that they need to work on.
You should see all the questions coming into the chat. So I think we should.
We're gonna, yeah, okay, we'll pick it up. By the way, just 2 resources. Definitely go to Seraph, SERAF. There are free resources on everything you ever wanted to know about angel investing, and a shout out to Christopher Mirabelli in Boston, who with colleagues has pulled those resources together. And also ACA has many materials that are available to everybody. So look those up. And the last thing that I'll mention regarding where the deals come to Maine Angels is that over the last number of years, a new entity has come into being in focusing on ensuring that more women become interested, learn about early stage investing, and potentially become angels. A new organization was created with New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. And it's the Northern New England Women Investor Network, NNEWIN.org. I will raise my mug once again to toast all of the women who have worked hard over the years to create that. You do not need to be an accredited investor to join that network. It is a training, learning, networking group. And one thing it has done is it has brought to all of our attention opportunities that are surfacing in all 3 states and even parts of Massachusetts. So I just wanted to mention that. So I think you can take a look. I think we've talked a little bit about who actually are the members of Maine Angels. They are as diverse as people who are making their very first $10,000 investment. By the way, 10,000 is pretty much the minimum that any founder would be asking. We're noticing that the ask is getting higher as the years go by. And so, but in Maine Angels, it's often starting at 10K to go in on a deal, and it can go way higher than that. And Maine Angels will form a group so that if there are 10 people that want to put in 10K each, then we're able to do 100K. Yes, another shout out. Yes, women, we are now at 33%, and it was 14% 5 years ago, and that has been a very concerted effort. And by the way, this is a good moment to also, I'd like to give a huge disclaimer, which is that my focus, along with many others, has been on increasing the number of women that are engaged in the ecosystem, to the neglect of other underrepresented segments of the population. And one thing that is glorious is that more and more organizations are focusing very much on all forms of equality, diversity, and inclusivity. So it is a beautiful thing. I just wanted to mention now that where I keep saying women, 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 as I said earlier, I tend not to speak about things about which I do not know very much, and I am on a learning curve. So I just wanted to mention that. The 2020 achievements, Matt, we'll talk about that, won't we, on a later slide. I guess we could mention, dear ago at this point in time, one of the large coups of 2020 is that a new fund was created of $2.4 million. It involved 7 banks in Maine and 46 individuals, with 21 of those, I believe, being women. One of the criteria is that 50% of the fund will be invested in Maine businesses, 25% in female founded businesses. And I think it's $860,000 that was invested already. So for a fund that was started in June of 2020, not bad that so much has already been put into the ecosystem. Yes, just sitting at our table, there are these, and CEI, MTI, and Maine Venture Fund come to our meetings. Again, what is incredible about Maine is we try to ensure no one falls between the net or through the net. so that by having our partners right in at our meetings, they can tell us what grants or investments they've already done, what they know, and it both expedites our process as well as making it more thorough. And this is just fun. You can see the diversity of the companies in which Maine Angels have been invested. Matt, over to you.
Terrific. Thanks, Susan. So having scrolled through some of the Q&A, this slide, which is by no means comprehensive or particularly scientific representation of some of the companies, but I think it's worth just touching on, you can, if some of you are familiar with some of these companies, you'll see that there's a range of different sectors represented here. Most of the folks that are on this page, the companies are Maine-based companies, but certainly not all of them. And we definitely have a, as Susan alluded to, successful track record of working with out-of-state companies and also out-of-state angel organizations. And it's really actually been quite a useful two-way pipeline, because we've had a number of companies that started getting their first round of angel investing with us, have gone on to successfully get additional investment from the Boston ecosystem, for example, or beyond. And there was also a question about exits. A couple of the companies that are on here, for example, Pica and Syme Therapeutics, I may miss others, but have gone through an exit. In both cases were bought by a strategic investor, so a larger industrial player, and very successful outcomes in both cases. We have had, I believe, one company go through an IPO, but generally that's not the typical exit. It's usually ends up with a strategic buyer, or in some cases being taken private by a private equity firm. But we've had a number of exits, but I'd say we're getting to the point, given the time horizon and the length of time Maine Angels has been at this, which is sort of roughly a decade, we're now getting to the point where we have some much more mature companies, and I expect to see the exit profile start to go up and go up consistently in the years to come. If you want to flip forward one, Katie, this is now a bit more of the kind of quantitative assessment of who we are. So what this really shows you, you can read the data for yourself, is that we don't have a particularly huge spike in any one area. And this is a little bit skewed by the fact that in some cases you have larger deals or whatever, but really, as you can see, there's a wide range. And I think it's worth pointing out that at some level, the diversity of the sectors profiled here is actually a good reflection of the diversity of the backgrounds of the members of the Maine Angels, which for me personally has always been a great pleasure, because I get to sit back when we used to have meetings, sit next to someone who ran a successful pharmaceutical company and has a tremendous knowledge in that space and in bioscience, or someone like Susan with a great background in real estate and hospitality. We have folks from the media side of things. We have a lot of engineers. We have a wide range. So, and finance folks as well. So don't be discouraged if you feel like, oh, perhaps I don't fit some small sample, particular focus area by sector. That has never been a barrier. If you want to flip forward one, Katie. This is worth, and there were a lot of questions in the Q&A about the sort of actual investment process. And so I'll sort of touch on those, but I'll give you maybe the high level story here, which is, again, we are very grateful for all of the resources that exist within the Maine ecosystem that nurture very, very early stage companies to even get them to the point where they get into our kind of screening profile. And frankly, as well, to the entrepreneurs who are putting in all of the sweat and the work and late nights to get themselves there. The way that our process works is that we screen deals where we have a dedicated committee that works with companies who come forward or who are referred to us by a variety of different channels who think that they might be interested in approaching the Maine Angels for investment. And this looks like, and it is, that there's quite a fine filter at the screening level to go from over 150 companies that we screened and had a dialogue with in 2020 to 18 who actually got to pitch. And that seems as though it is a lot of rejection. But I actually would encourage you, if you're an entrepreneur or someone thinking of referring an entrepreneur, to think of it as it's actually we find a very constructive process. We work really hard to both be honest with the companies, but to actually help give them constructive feedback. And in many cases, we send companies away politely saying, you're not quite ready yet, but these are the things that you should really go away and think about working on. So I saw one question in the Q&A, which was, do people only get one shot, one bite of the apple? And the answer is definitely not. Typically, we don't see the same company pitch repeatedly. So generally the mechanism where we would see a company repeatedly is at the screening process. And so we actually are quite happy with that. And we really take it as a very positive sign when a company comes back, having taken feedback and done the work necessary to fill in those gaps. That's actually an excellent early data point, which is usually a tailwind for the company. Entrepreneurs then come and pitch. We have 2 to 3 every month. And most, but not all of those go through diligence, and then some portion of those end up with an investment. And if you look at the next slide, as you got to, Katie, so
Sorry, I keep clicking buttons.
No, this is perfect.
Right.
It's good. It's a good prompt to keep rolling. So this is by no means exhaustive, but I think it's useful to understand what are the reasons, and this is at various stages. It could be, but the two chief places where people get screened out of the process are screening and the due diligence process, between that and investment. And generally, it's either there's not a great fit with the business model itself, which is number 2. And though all of these, number 2 generally all gets picked up at screening. So generally the ones that could be screening or often are during diligence are all under number 1, which is really, there's not enough confidence yet among the potential investors that the company is ready for prime time. That is not to say that it won't get there. That's not to say that collectively or individually people feel like the company is doomed or can never be successful. It's really a question of maturity often. There are some gaps, and in some cases there are mindset issues, and that's perfectly fine. The founders, the entrepreneurs are always entitled to do what they think is right for the company. But we have found over the years that when we don't have an alignment of vision with the founder, that leads to all kinds of problems downstream. So that's not in any way a negative reflection on people, but where there are mindset misalignments, that can also be a driver. And I think this covers a number of the questions that were raised as well. One question that I'll just touch on quickly is a mechanical one, which is there were a few questions about valuations. And I would say broadly, there's a combination of art and science to that. There's absolutely not one metric. It's very dependent on sector. It's very dependent on stage of the company, and it's very dependent on whether they've taken valued financing in the past or have other partners. And valuation is easy to focus on, but it's by no means the only one. My comment to any prospective entrepreneurs out there is also the terms of a deal are extremely important and often as important as the headline valuation number. And you'll hear a lot from the angels about terms. And I would encourage you to be thoughtful about that. We have a sample set of term expectations on our website. Look at that. That's an area that we find consistently has not been thought deeply about by founders. Understandably, it's their first time raising money, but that is often a sticking point and a cause for a lot of back and forth. So I would encourage all of you to be thoughtful about terms as well, and what you are prepared to do and not do, and also why those terms might be there, because I think thinking about it from the investor's perspective is also quite useful.
Matt, I'm going to jump in here and answer a few of the questions that I've now
Great.
just seen coming through there, if that would be all right. One, somebody endorsed the comment of Chris Wolfel of Rue Institute. Delighted to have Rue Institute in Maine, a game changer. Bring it on. And hope that many people at Rue have a chance to watch and engage or whatever with everything we're talking about. But what I did not see Chris's comment, I only saw somebody else endorse it. Somebody asked about what challenges we see about starting companies in Maine. And this is a good moment to say that we realize that starting and scaling a business in Maine means we have to look at all kinds of issues. It is everything from housing, infrastructure, broadband access, transportation, creation of community, not just in Portland, but throughout the state of Maine. So I just want to mention that Maine Angels tend to get involved in all of those different elements in one way or another. And I also want to mention that we are very fortunate in our current environment of our elected officials and the dedication that the Department of Economic Development has. And I encourage everybody to go to the website, and there is a way that you can use a resource compass that you can find what resources you're looking for at any point in time. We are also one of the few states that has somebody focusing on the outdoor recreation industry. We've got Focus. Hannah Pingree heads up Office of the Future and Innovation. It's a beautiful thing. So again, there's all these elements, but I just wanted to emphasize that we realize that there's all kinds of challenges that need to be overcome. And the other thing, follow on, great, because Matt, yeah, I know I was surprised the first time that an entrepreneur came back to the trough for more money. And I was like, are you kidding me? I invested, where's my return? But not so fast. So over to you.
Yeah, terrific. No, those are excellent points, Susan. Thank you. And if you click one, there was a little animation on this slide, Katie, which I apologize for. So it just gives a little breakdown of what was strictly Maine Angels and what also included the Dirigo Fund and Bangor Angels. There's a lot of cross-pollination between these groups, but I think the key takeaway here, perhaps two, one is that even in a difficult year from a connectedness perspective, and certainly not an easy year for the entrepreneurs, we did what I would say was a strong amount of investment, more than 2 years prior. It's a little bit chunky. These numbers aren't perfect from a year-to-year basis because it's not as though we have hundreds of deals. So one really large deal can skew a particular year, but I think we all felt very proud and quite pleased actually with the amount of investment that was made in 2020. And there was a question I saw about, does the year that just was and is still ongoing change how things are going to be in the future? And it's interesting because I think the answer is yes. I think that our scope has broadened. We had our largest influx of members ever that we've had, our largest growth on a nominal basis. And I think that was a reflection of, honestly, it's easier for people at some level to attend meetings. We have more out-of-staters, and certainly just anecdotally, we're seeing a lot of interest of folks who are either making a part-time Maine resident more permanent, or coming here from other places, or dipping a toe in the water and saying, I'm interested in perhaps doing that, and I'd love to get involved and understand more about the startup ecosystem. So I think despite a terrible year on many dimensions, we saw a lot of really positive signs that I think have a positive potential for Maine in the future. And to the point Susan made about the follow-ons, I would say to any founders or entrepreneurs out there, you should think of the angel investing almost as really the first step on a long staircase of fundraising And the fact that we see most of our deals come back for second rounds, or we participate in a Series A round, which is a more formal round with more institutional investors, that is the norm. And so as you think about approaching Maine Angels and all the feedback you might get about your pitch and the first time you're experiencing due diligence or even screening, remember that these are, if you generally, for most entrepreneurs, for you to get where you ultimately want to go, you're going to have to go through this process over and over and over again. It is a core skill, and it is a skill which in most cases is utterly different than whatever passion, interest, subject matter expertise, or skill set got you into the company that you have started. And so I would encourage you to think about Maine Angels is often the first formal stop on that process for people. The first time they've had to do a formal pitch deck, the first time they've had to go through the scrutiny of due diligence, the first time they've had to negotiate a term sheet. And I would encourage you, even if you're not successful, to look at that as a real workshop for developing a skill that you are absolutely going to need, whether or not we actually invest with you. And even if we do, you're going to need it, and you're going to need it with increasingly sort of sophisticated investors. So we certainly approach it from the perspective of trying to make it very constructive for the companies that are going through it. And I hope that the entrepreneurs see it the same way.
What I'm
Matt?
hearing, fundraising is a continuous process that takes practice, and this pitching to the Maine Angels is not a one and done deal. We have so many questions that have come in the chat that I'm going to have to screenshot a lot of them, and I wonder if we can follow up with some resources, and just because we could have had a whole other conversation focused just on these questions.
Absolutely.
We only have 8 minutes left, so I do want to get to, I know we have like two, maybe
I'm going to jump in while you're looking, Katie. I saw 2 come up that I'll quickly respond to. Somebody said, hey, do you look for board seats? Heck yes. That is certainly one of the terms that we look for. It's a lovely thing to be able to have a seat on the board of a company, but it is not a must. Somebody also asked whether we limit the number of startups we look at within a sector. No, we do not. Aquaculture. We are always interested, of course, in hearing about companies that are doing startups in the aquaculture space. It may be myself. I've invested in 2. I may be less likely to invest in a third. As I mentioned, I'm looking for diversification. But to that point, we in Maine, somebody else asked about, do we specialize? We're starting to develop sector groups of angels, particularly focused on certain industries. Aquaculture is one. Bioscience, bring it on. Pet med, we are world leaders in certain categories, and the idea of having a cluster in Maine is something we're interested in. Alternative energy. But the answer to the question is no, we don't max out in a sector at what we look at. Individual investors may say, you know what, I've already got that covered. I'm going to go somewhere else. Back over to you, Matt.
Great.
And I'd like to address we've had a few questions just about DEI and making sure that you're looking at, a variety of deals, and how to make sure that, and really try to get across that you are, an inclusive group, or at least working to be one. So maybe we can touch on that too.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can certainly touch on that. I think the slide that's up right now at some level shows sort of, this is a combination of, let's say, mission, interest, and incentives. I think the majority of members of Maine Angels are doing it, at least in part, because on whatever dimension and in their own way, they really care about Maine and want to contribute to it. So I think there's an affinity and an interest as a starting point. And then I would say the incentives piece is that the Maine Seed Capital tax credit is absolutely, I can tell you, works the way it was designed to work, in the sense of, if you have 2 deals, one is a deal from Connecticut and one is a deal from Maine that's eligible for the seed tax credit, and you're roughly excited equally about the prospects of both companies, the vast majority of the time, you'll choose the Maine company because the incentive presented by the seed capital tax credit is very powerful for folks with Maine income tax liabilities, and it does work. So we're certainly very grateful for that. And to circle back and talk about the question of diversity and inclusion, I think Susan touched on gender, which I would say has been the chief focus and place where the energies of the group have gone over the past few years. One constraint at some level we have is that all investments that get made by the Maine Angels are, while the process is very collective and we have an apparatus and an infrastructure to function as a group and get good outcomes, the investments, while we present them in these statistics as collective, are 100% individual decisions. So it's very difficult. We don't, as a group, have any authority to set any objectives over the investments we make. The thing that we can control is our participation and support of the ecosystem, which is cultivating an environment and a set of diverse founders that may end up coming to us to get their opportunity. And we also work hard to make sure that we're equitable in our screening, but ultimately we can't control the investments because that is individual. So the best way we can sort of work on that is to ensure that our membership is as diverse as possible, to the extent that that would ultimately reflect in the investments, again, up to the individuals. But I would say this has been more and more top of mind for us. We've made really good headway on gender diversity, that we still have a long way to go. And you saw numbers on membership, which is great. We've had an uptick as well. And on that logo slide, I think there were, maybe 4 or 5 companies which either had female founders or very senior members of the management team were women, which was great. But I think on other elements of diversity, we're still earlier stage. And I hope that we can come back to you in a couple of years and show that same sort of rapid and sustained progress on those dimensions as well.
And Katie, I know we're going to start wrapping up, but something you and I are both involved in is Maine Accelerates Growth. Thank you, MTI, and thank you so many organizations, because increasingly over the years, all the various entities, public, private sector, whatever, have come together and have monthly conversations with updates of what's happening. And with the idea of focus on DEI, I love that it is a primary conversation, that I don't think there's an organization in Maine that does not have a new lens on what it means to be inclusive, equal, and diverse. So it is a lovely thing that that is happening. And then also, if we should not end without mentioning that I think we are all seeing the influx of talent coming into the state of Maine. And it's a beautiful thing to see, and many entities are supportive of that. And I do witness that it is increasing the diversity of the population of Maine with the new talent coming into our state.
So I will say just quickly that I'm very pleased with all of the questions. I'm a little overwhelmed that we couldn't get to all of them. So I'm doing my best to copy all of them down. I'm going to send them to you both. And I feel like there either needs to be we could have another session on this, or maybe there could be another answering session.
All to be continued, and I will volunteer. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Susan V. Morris. My website is susanvmorris.com. And my ask of everyone that is perhaps still with us at this point in time is, I am very serious about my 3-prong approach, where my focus is right now, of who is founding companies, how access to funding, do we need to change the rules to the game? And we certainly need to change the rules and disrupt what it takes to be a board member of a private company and a corporation. I am very committed to this year, if nothing else, having some panel discussions. I've already been whispering in Katie's ear this year with regards to some of those topics, particularly board membership, which again comes back to DEI. DEI. So my ask is that if people currently are on boards in Maine, or better yet, outside of Maine, and are willing to share their expertise and experience, that's great. We also will be in search of funding. There are incredible national and international organizations that prepare people for boards, as well as all kinds of other endeavors. There are chapters of them in Boston and in New York, but we do not have any chapters in Portland or in Maine anywhere. And hence we are going to want to find ways to leverage the resources that are available outside of our state. So if anyone is interested in stepping up and helping with funding of that would be a beautiful thing. And I've now mentioned where you can find me. Thanks.
And Matt, what about you for folks who want to get in touch?
LinkedIn is great. And just if you search for Matt Ware and Maine, I suspect you'll find me.
Excellent. So we
Feel free,
have,
please.
I really want to thank everyone who's still on the call. Last housekeeping is that we're going to have more content coming out. Startup Maine and CEI Women's Business Center are working on some content around BIPOC entrepreneurs. For anyone that needs a free ticket to E2 Tech's Clean Tech Open event, we have some free tickets, so reach out to me if you want to attend there. And we really appreciate Susan and Matt's time. There's so much to cover, so we really help you at least starting the conversation to demystify Maine Angels. So thank you so much for your time. I will have this recording out in a few days as well.
Great. Thank you, Katie, and thank you everyone for engaging in Maine's ecosystem.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.